Hello. Welcome. How's it going? Hello. Brandon Woods, you are first. We are multi-streaming today, cross-streaming today. Gonna do heavy politics. No fun day here. But I hope you guys are having a relaxing Sunday. Hi, Landum. Lazy Lizards Lounge. Like, you don't like being called Landum. Hi, Liz. The brain is not quite engaged. I like switched live and I was like, oh fuck, I forgot to shut my bedroom door. I forgot to turn my lights on. Like, piecing it together. Sunday, no fun day. Well, I've been meaning to stream more on YouTube, and YouTube definitely needs heavy politics. So that's what the day calls for. Politicking. Okay. If you like dog shit content, please subscribe. Uh-oh. That's annoying. Okay, well, we can start, I guess. I was kind of waiting for more folks to come on in and say what's up, but I don't know. Might be just a slow Sunday. I usually chill for like an hour on stream, but I'm like, I was gonna try to be more professional. And it's not working out so well, but Cloth Sunday for the win. Yeah, I don't know. I just like my RSD is kicking in real hard. Take your meds. All two of you.
He threw a kilo of pure uncut white supremacy on the table. Hey, Heathen Granny, thank you. I appreciate that. From Turtle Island to Palestine, colonialism is a crime. Let's go. Hey, PJ Fry, welcome in. Good to see you. How you doing? We'll get shout outs in a little while. Y'all are all following each other. Everyone follow each other.
Everyone that's in here streams. Just follow each other, and we'll do shout outs in a little bit. Joker will be here. He just has to take care of some stuff. Thanks, Liz. I know you're streaming, so I don't expect you to do it. Multitaskalizator. Good, trying to keep my two kitties from attacking a new kitty. Aww. Yeah, it's gonna take a little bit of time to integrate. I got you, Liz. That makes sense. Yeah, new kitty hype. That's so exciting. You know, Heathen Granny, it's interesting because Israel appears to be the one calling the shots, but ultimately Israel itself is a project of Western Empire. So like it's not the tail wagging the dog, you know, it's still a colonial project put forth by the West in order to have an outpost essentially in the Middle East, in the region, for its resources. Like that is why Britain wanted, like, the Ottoman Empire to crumble, wanted to take the land in the first place. What's up, Angel? Welcome in. Let's see if you put the new one in the bathroom. Yeah, the bathroom trick. No, I said we were doing serious stuff. Like, no, today is politic day. Let's see. I met a Jew about 3 weeks ago. They told me they went to Israel and they were welcome, but then they realized that it was Palestine. Yeah. It's cool that they were able to, like, realize it, because the birthright trips can be very, what's the word? Indoctrinating. Oh, good. I'm glad, Angel. Give y'all some candy. And then we've got mostly, or like a good chunk of Palestine content. Christina, welcome in. You want cookies, painting, nails? Painting. I want painting. Palestinians are actually more welcoming than the colonists. Yeah, yeah, for sure. Well, I mean, like, Palestinians were never like super opposed to like necessarily the migration of Jews, especially after the Holocaust. Like, it was understood that these people needed a place to go. They just didn't expect them to like steal their homes, like literally. Yeah, like, it's like, hey, you're a refugee, I'll welcome you into my home, and then like a year later they're like, you got to get the fuck out. You're like, what? This was my house. What are you talking about? They're like, no, we're gonna kill you. Like, we're taking this house. This is our house now. And it happened over and over and over and over again. It happened thousands of times. Thousands of times. It be 420. I was just thinking, I'm like, don't I get a smoke time raid?
Dead End Joker raided your channel with 1 viewers.
Let's frickin' go, Dead End Joker. Welcome in. Yeah. Dead End Joker mod extraordinaire. Make sure you guys like over on YouTube, and if you can, subscribe to my YouTube. I'm 1 sub away from 300. There would be 300 on both platforms. That's pretty awesome. If you're not subbed to my YouTube, do it. Do it now. How am I feeling today? I'm feeling productive, focused, determined, feeling like I can maybe do this. My joints hurt. Knees and my hips. Getting old. Yeah, I'll be all right. I'm just whining. All right, and then here is the watching playlist for today. Thanks, Joker. Let's go. Yeah, thanks, Ree, and welcome in. I was expecting an alert or a notification, so I was like looking for it, but I trust you. Mercury. I mean, I don't. Is it still in retrograde? I'm still blaming it on Mercury. Things have been twitchy. Like Twitch has been real twitchy. My OBS completely died. Even like reinstalled a new one. Like I reinstalled it. I was like, okay, and I'm like, it still will only run as a background program. I don't know how to fix that. Oh, car trouble is like so awful. Stressful. I'm sorry, Ree, that sucks. Oh, the Mercury Sable. Hi, PJ. Hi, Inky. It's funny, I like look over here for my YouTube chat and I look over here for Twitch chat. Hi. Hi. Sailor Mercury. Let's go. Soul Life.
This is turning into a revolution.
OMG, it's one of my most watched streamers. Adrian69 hello Adrian69 hello Adrian69 hype too high from work. Adrian69
Oh my goodness.
disability pride.
I'm one of your most watched streamers. That's so I'm so flattered. And thank you for 11 months, sweetie. Hi from work. Or, yeah. Hi to you at work. I'm sorry you're at work. But I hope I can make your day go by a little bit better. Yeah, as Fighting Gale says, you know, we lead such busy lives, and it is, you know, it is a real treat that you guys can make time to hang out with me. Like 30 minutes ago, 25 minutes ago, I was super depressed because there was like 2 people in my stream and I was like, where is everybody? The RSD is real. I know, I was lurking when I'm working. I mean, it's a me problem. I gotta get over it. Like, it's a me problem. You know? Something I gotta work on and grow. Yeah, like you can, like in OBS and Streamlabs, you can hide them. Like, so they're not visible all the time. But then, like, I find that stresses me out too. I don't know. It'd probably be, like, healthier than... Hey, you got a notification. That's awesome. On YouTube. Yeah, there is a way to hide it from yourself. You just like click on it and it goes viewers hidden. Now I don't know. Just have to assume that there's a ton of people here because the chat's so fucking active, right? You do it. Our brains are so, yeah, my brain is so silly. And like, I was off one of my main meds for, hi Neuro Riot. I was off one of my main meds for like a week. So my brain is not fully firing on all cylinders yet, but we're getting back to it. Yes, all the cuties are filling in. Let's go. Filing in? Filing in. Yeah, that's true. Like, definitely, because like when people raid, it'll be like, oh, like so and so raided with one person, but there was like definitely more than one person, or there'll be like multiple people in the chat, but Twitch still only shows like one viewer. And I'm like, you're lying to us, I can tell. Arnolda, hello, welcome in. Exactly. What's up, Pendulous Dragon? Welcome in. Yay, I'm glad you like them. Thank you. Yeah, if you want holiday emotes, you gotta subscribe on Twitch. On a binge. Like just like energy binge. If you like dog shit content, please subscribe. Why can't I gift you a sub? Didn't you resubscribe recently? So weird. Oh, I think so. Oh. Might not have gone through. Well, I think we should send PD some cash. We don't like our friends being broke. Mutual aid. A little bit here, a little bit there. My Cash App isn't working because I have to switch my bank card too. But I mean, I just got paid, so like I can PayPal you a few bucks. Like that's not a problem. You know, I am saving up to move, but like a few bucks isn't gonna break the fucking bank. You know what I mean? Yeah, Inky. I sent them something earlier already. Yeah, Shakespeare is having money trouble right now too. So, you know, if other people want to help out, I believe we have a link. I think we have a command already from when she had the car accident. Thank you for saying that, Christina. Who isn't having money problems? Yeah, for real. It's that works. Oh, that's tough, Christina, having to set a boundary with an old friend. But yeah, that's awful. I'm sorry you had to go through that, but I'm proud of you for doing it. I mean, Elon Musk could. Yeah, Soul Life, you don't suck. You're like such a valued member of my community and like an amazing mod, and like you work really hard to like help people out. Like you do a lot for a lot of people. Sometimes people just don't understand you. Yeah, Soul Life's over on YouTube. Yay, thank you, Christina.
Two hours later.
Yeah, I have to see an eye doctor. Yes, welcome in, Inky Cap. How you doing, sweetie? Thanks for booping, PD. Hey, Almac, welcome in. I mean, yeah, that's cool. I remember being on unemployment. I was on unemployment during like the lockdown, and like it was nice. It was nice. I miss it. Who? Me? Have I been self-medicating? I mean, yeah. I would say yes. I do self-medicate. No, I'm not muted. Of course, October. What's up? Mm. It is this. Ta-da. So welcome. I like that idea. Chat, we do have an ad break coming up. If you would like to support the stream, you can subscribe, you can gift a sub, you can sub with Prime. And if you can't do that, you can always make sure you like and subscribe on YouTube for free. And, you know, keep booping the algorithm. I appreciate y'all being here. Because live on the sun. Hey, Squish. Smash Mouth is not classic rock. Jeez. Classic rock song. No. Doesn't work that way. Oh yeah, I forgot. Since we have the politics tag on, you probably won't even see any fucking ads. Somebody once told me.
question. But so far, as we saw in Gaza on many occasions, the Americans are complicit in this genocide, and they're complicit in the war against Lebanon. And there is nothing that shows that they really want to impose a ceasefire on Lebanon. Not only that, they probably would like to, and this is what Amos Hodgkin said, to protect the interest of the Israelis by him referring to the
Okay, who's ready to get sad? And angry. Well, we've got lots to be angry about, lots to go over. Unfortunately, that is the state of the world. What's this? I was gonna start with Caitlin. Check that out. Let's see. Yeah, it's really bad, you know, so I do understand if you need to do self-care and take a break and you know, go watch cartoons over with Landom Lazy Lizards Lounge. it gets to be too much, take a break. Not everyone is as ADHD as you. Not everyone can listen to 2 streams at the same time. Yeah, or have the technology. A good point, Joker.
Meditations on a 6-year-old amputee crawling through Gaza with the help of a roller skate. It's funny the things that get to you when watching The Nightmare in Gaza, out of all the horrors you'll see from day to day. Today I saw a video of a 6-year-old Palestinian boy whose legs had been amputated, dragging himself through his tent camp with the help of a roller skate worn on his hand, and it just about destroyed me. It was one of those inline skates that showed up in the 90s, rollerblades we called them. Western boys played with them in summers full of joy and laughter and skinned knees and grass stains. Now a little boy named Mohammed Saeed uses one to help him scoot through the dirt because his legs were blown off by Western military explosives, launched by Israelis who probably played with inline skates when they were small. This genocide has been going on so long that the child amputees who live all over Gaza are learning strategies to get through life without limbs. They did a study recently which found that virtually all children in Gaza now feel their deaths are imminent, and half of those surveyed said they wish to die. But their lives go on. Even with missing limbs, often amputated without morphine or anesthetic, their lives go on. Crawling their way through muddy tent camps, they go on. They find a way through each day. It's the kind of thing that might inspire you if it were something you were just passively witnessing, instead of something the Western power structure you live under is actively inflicting on people. For those of us who live under the shadow of the U.S. centralized empire, it's a bit more emotionally complicated than an inspirational story about the indomitable spirit of the Palestinian people, because it's also a story about how we failed to stop this from happening. When we look at Mohammed Saeed crawling through the dirt on his leg stumps with the help of a roller skate, we are seeing our own
I mean, yes, we can absolutely pin a content warning. Mods, can you do that, please? I thought I gave fair warning before we started the segment. So I'm sorry, but I thought I did a good job.
civilization failed to stop this from happening. When we look at Mohammed Saeed crawling through the dirt on his leg stumps with the help of a roller skate, we are seeing our own civilization reflected back at us, a genocidal dystopia of complete moral bankruptcy. This is what we have become. This is what we have allowed our rulers to turn us into. Oh, Muhammad, I am so sorry. I am so sorry that we allowed it to come to this. I am sorry that your legs were taken from you, and I am sorry for everything else that has been taken away from you on top of them. Your parents, maybe. Your siblings, maybe. Certainly some loved ones. Obviously your home, and obviously your childhood. I have nothing to offer at this time, either to my readers or to Mohammed Saeed, apart from my own sorrow. Some days all you can do is pour your heart out on the floor and warn passers-by to try not to slip on it, tears streaming over the gaping hole in your chest. None of this is right, and I don't feel like pretending it's right. I don't feel like trying to put a positive spin on it or say it's all going to get better. Some things are just terrible, and it's okay to feel terrible about them. Feelings are meant to be felt. It is sad, and it's enraging, and it's shameful, and it's damning, and absolutely nothing else. We live in a world of such breathtaking beauty and such jaw-dropping savagery. Explosions of love hiding behind every molecule in a society that is ruled by true monsters. We are big enough to hold these paradoxes. We are big enough to feel the majesty of creation and the gut punch of genocide. The wet, juicy, sloppy love for our fellow human beings, and the horror at how cruel we can be to one another. The exhilaration of life on this strange blue planet, and the crushing grief of failure after failure to make things a little bit better here. Both the good and the bad are allowed to flourish in this world. Clearly. I have no answers or miracle cures for this. We do our best to be decent people and get through each day. We pick up our skate and crawl on.
Thank you for joining us. Israel has
How will military operations bring you Palestine back?
كيف العمليات كيف عمليات المقاومة رح تسترجع لنا فلسطين؟ بالتفكير thinking كيف المقاومة ضد الاحتلال؟ كيف العمليات الاستشهادية رح ترجع لنا فلسطين؟ حتى معنا it will never come back.
Palestine will never come back? Oh, so then what will happen?
Because we're not all doing it.
Okay. So what will happen? What does she think will happen?
With what?
Here, with Palestine. What's the future of Palestine?
برأيك شو مستقبل فلسطين؟ حتى تحت الاحتلال. It will remain under occupation.
مستحيل يعني إنه كلياتنا مش نفس التفكير. مستحيل.
Because we are not the same kind of thinking. It's impossible.
How will military operations and resistance get you Palestine back? How will it return Palestine?
كيف ممكن للمقاومة والعمليات الاستشهادية اللي عم بتصير اللي عم بيعملوها ترجع لنا فلسطين؟
يضلوا بالمقاومة يضلوا يقاوموا أكثر وأكثر.
Should keep resisting and resist more and more.
And meaning the Jews will leave? That's the idea?
واليهود رح يطلعوا؟ رح يغادروا؟
ممكن.
Possibly.
But they're not leaving.
مش رح يطلعوا. فإيش برأيك؟
يعني مستحيل يكون في بيننا وبينهم سلام، مستحيل يكون بيننا وبينهم أي إشي.
It's impossible for there to be peace between us and them. It's impossible to have anything between us and them.
إنه بعد ما بنشوف أطفالنا بتتقتل نسائنا وشوفنا كل هذا بده يهون علينا إنه نشوف هذا الإشي.
Being killed. Do you think we could do this?
Make peace.
Make peace? كيف ممكن العمليات العسكرية ترجع لنا فلسطين? You mean the mortar operations?
Yes.
The mortar operations.
Any operation like October 7th.
أي عملية كيف أي عملية ممكن ترجع لنا فلسطين؟ كيف المقاومة ممكن ترجع لنا فلسطين؟
يمكن لو اتحدوا مع بعض
كيف العمليات الاستشهادية ممكن ترجع لنا فلسطين برأيك؟
لو اتحدوا مع بعض كل المقاومة تتحرر فلسطين.
If all the resistance united, Palestine would be free.
How though? The Israelis will leave? What's going to happen?
كيف؟ هل الإسرائيليين رح يرحلوا؟ إيش رح يصير؟
والله العلم عند ربنا يعني رح يرحلوا مش رح يرحلوا بس أكيد رح تتحرر فلسطين.
God only knows, but surely Palestine will be free.
How will military operations help you get Palestine back?
العمليات الاستشهادية كيف رح تساعد إنه نسترجع فلسطين؟
Yeah, I don't know about this, Liz.
No, I don't want to answer.
Not a good question.
On film?
Yeah.
تحب تحكي لنا ليش مش سؤال منيح على الكاميرا؟ بدون كاميرا.
Okay.
السؤال تاعك هذا السؤال بس عشان اعرف ما بسأل.
ليش؟
احكي لي.
بدي باقي الجملة.
اوكي، هذا السؤال ما بسأله لحدا يعني خصوصا فلسطيني. انا ما بحكي لك الشعور الداخلي، الشعور الداخلي ما بتوصف. الشعور الداخلي صراحة بالنسبة عندك احتلال، عندك حتى دائما بقطع طريقك من هان لهان، دائما بتوفر.
That's okay. I've got lots of content, but we're gonna skip because it seems wrong. All right.
Has launched more attacks across. Thank you for joining us. Israel has launched more attacks across Syria with a number of military sites targeted in just the past 12 hours. Israeli media say the Air Force destroyed warehouses storing missiles and rocket launchers near the town of Kastal in the Damascus countryside. They also hit ammunition depots in the town of Muhaija east of Daraa. Well, let's discuss these latest developments in Syria with Robert K. Spinfold now. He's a lecturer in peace and security at Durham University. Thank you so much for joining us, Robert. Let's start with what's been happening in these Israeli strikes in Syria, which are continuing. We saw 61 missile attacks on military sites across Syria in a period of 5 hours on Saturday evening. What do we know about what the Israelis are targeting, and what is the aim here? What's the objective?
Well, they seem to be going after anything and everything, really, that's associated with the former regime. And at the start, they were attacking targets in Damascus that didn't seem like military targets, but there was all sorts of speculation that they must have had intelligence that there were assets hidden there that the Assad regime might not have declared. Now, the Israelis sold these strikes to the Americans to say, look, you know, we're getting rid of the chemical weapons, we're targeting the chemical and biological weapons sites. And the Americans said, OK, you know, that's legitimate. But since then, there's been a lot more disconnect between Washington and Jerusalem because the Israelis have simply started targeting anything really associated with the former regime.
Right, and they've also deployed ground troops into and beyond the demilitarized buffer zone for the first time in 50 years. Are they taking this step just in the context of the security of Israel, as they say, or are there other ambitions here?
I think they're doing it simply because they can. I think there is a security aspect here. They don't know about the new regime. They don't know who's in charge. They don't know who's on the other side. The Israelis and the Israeli intelligence was taken by surprise with these developments, just as much as the rest of the world was. So I think the Israelis are erring on the side of caution here. The problem is when they err on the side of caution, they also escalate because, as you say, they've taken over 250 square kilometres of territory.
Disagree hard. hard disagree. So, like, yeah, they're doing it because they can get away with it, but they're also doing it because they want to expand to a greater Israel. Like, that is their goal. They want Syria. They're encroaching on Syria. They're going to occupy Syria. And I don't buy this narrative that no Western intelligence had any idea when the Kurds have been supported by the West. So...
and they launched an unprecedented number of strikes. You mentioned 61 strikes. Over a year prior, over the entire course of a year, Israel struck Syria 220 times approximately. So it just shows you that, okay, the Israelis might think they're erring on the side of caution, but actually they're escalating tensions, especially with the new government in power in Syria.
Right. And what has this new government in power been saying? Ahmed al-Shara has been speaking, and he talked about Syrians being too tired to fight of another conflict, in reference probably to what Israel has been doing. What is the message right now that's coming from this new administration?
I think he's calling Israel's bluff. He's saying to the Israelis, you have got no legitimacy to strike, you've got no legitimacy to occupy, because here I am telling you we have no desire or intention to fight you. And this is a huge change. Don't forget, Syria has kind of been the core state that has been fighting Israel for decades. Israelis often talk of their own Syria syndrome, their kind of obsession with this idea that Syria is behind everything. So this is a huge paradigm shift from a guy who used to be affiliated to ISIL and Al-Qaeda of any organisation. You know, it's so surprising and so shocking. So I think he's saying to the international community, look, you know, here's my intentions. Now you have to stop the Israelis. And a lot of the time we're hearing people saying, OK, well, Jelani's saying, or as he is now, Shara is saying things that we like to hear, stuff about respect for the rule of law and minorities and women's rights, but we'll judge him by his deeds. Now, remember when the Syrian regime fell, Benjamin Netanyahu went to the border and said, we want peace with the new Syrian government and the Syrian people. But then look at Israel's intentions here with all these strikes and these occupations. So I think he's flipping round the way that the international community are judging him to say, OK, what about the Israelis? They might be saying one thing, but they're doing another. All
right. Speaking of the international community, they met in Aqaba, Jordan on Saturday, trying to present a united front as far as what the next steps and what Syria's future should look like. But we have various stakeholders here with various interests in Syria. How do you see them working together, if at all, for the future of Syria? Can they work together?
Well, I think that the point of the conference yesterday was for the international community and these key players to try and grab back some agency, because no one saw this coming. No one saw the fall of the regime. Remember, a day before the rebels reached Damascus, you heard Egypt, Jordan and other countries who don't like the Assad regime calling for a ceasefire. So events on the ground really overtook whatever it was they were planning. And as I say, they had no prior warning that this was going to happen, the only possible exception being Turkey because of their close ties to HTS. So the US is now trying to bring all these parties together and work out a middle ground, some way to protect, for example, the SDF, its relative allies in eastern Syria, but at the same time to appease Turkey, who are very much opposed to the FDF presence. So it's about trying to find that middle ground.
In 2 months, we're going to have a different US administration. Will it be the same? I mean, will they have the same approach towards Syria? Briefly, Robert.
Well, no, is the long and short of it. It was Donald Trump who tried to withdraw US troops from Syria. And actually, shortly after he did that, that's when Turkey began an unprecedented offensive against SDF-dominated territory. So I think Turkey knows its stock is very high at the moment, but will try and bide its time for the new administration to come in, which might be more supportive of its goals and interests.
Thank you so much for talking to us. Always good to get your analysis. Robert Gase-Penfold joining us here on the News Hour.
Make sure to subscribe to our channel to get the latest news from Al Jazeera.
Anonymous, thank you for gifting one to Bree.
I don't like them putting chemicals in the water. They turn the friggin' frogs gay. Do you understand that? Turn the friggin' frogs gay. Serious crap gay. blow for you. Place point.
My dingle? You love my dingle? I love your
If you
dingle.
like dog shit content, please subscribe.
Pizza. Chat, do we have any oilers? Any greasers? Want to get us to level 2?
Party 100.
Give me your fucking money!
Show love 69.
That's okay, chat. Thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you, Christina. Thank you, Squishy. Thank you, guys. I really appreciate it. All right.
Nice work, Bone Daddy.
We'll go to what maybe was maybe the most astonishing story. Not necessarily the one that surprised me the most, but certainly the most astonishing, I think. Maybe not even of the past 6 months, but of even a little bit longer than that. That's the collapse of the government in Syria and the moment that we're in now. And obviously, it's an ongoing conversation, Rania. We can't cover it all here. So I'll just preface my comments by saying I really hope people after this show also get an opportunity, in addition to listening to you here, to look at the interview you did with Elijah earlier this week for Dispatches, which I thought was, as always, packed full of information and critical insights on this issue and went really deeply on a number of different fronts. But yeah, I mean, I'll just say a few things maybe.
I would order you all pizza if I could, and we would have a pizza party.
And then turn it over to you. I mean, the culmination, first and foremost, of just an unbelievable campaign of an attempt to destroy a country, since 2011. I mean, I don't know what the final tally was. I think Qatar spent like $2 billion, $3 billion trying to overthrow the government in Syria. You had pretty much all the other Gulf states jumping in. You had the U.S., you had Israel, you had the Caesar sanctions and other sanctions, which were, some of the worst, if not the strictest sanctions on the planet Earth, trying to do everything possible to just strangle the average person on the street. In Syria, the constant bombings and attacks by Israel, the partitioning of the country that was facilitated by the United States and Turkey. I mean, it's, maybe it's something that the full magnitude of it, even just listening to myself right now, is still kind of sinking in. I'm sure maybe there is a historical parallel, but the lengths that were gone to destroy a nation and to lead to the downfall of a government, I don't know what the parallel is. There's nothing that really comes to mind directly, and the suffering of the average person. And we hear so much, of course, about the suffering that was brought through in different ways. Some of it, of course, coming from the government in different, guises, and there's many things out there, so I don't need to talk about that. People have seen it, but the suffering that was deliberately inflicted, I think it was like 125,000 Syrians died fighting some of this opposition in the time prior to the freezing of the conflict. So, huge numbers of families and others disrupted, changed for forever in this context, and all because a handful of powerful entities decided that they did not want Assad, they wanted somebody else, and no matter who had to pay the price, they were going to do anything possible to bring him down and to create such a terrible state of affairs and chaos that ultimately he would come down. Now he has come down. We're seeing, terrible scenes, and I know you're hearing more. You're there.
Karl Marx was right.
It's just amazing for me to reflect on this project to really take down Syria, and it's really unfortunate. I think that context has just been totally omitted from all of the commentary in the Western media. It's like there were never any sanctions, like there was never a dirty war, like there was never. I mean, I was going back and reading, Rania, and I'll stop here and hand it to you, some of the stuff from 2013 in the Western media about like the elections that were happening. And, very begrudgingly, you have Washington Post, New York Times, LA Times reporting on all these people going to vote in favor of Assad and saying, yeah, there's all these people who are so angry at the opposition and think that it would be terrible for their country if they came in, and they have criticisms of Assad, but they want to, also protect their country in ways they think are relevant. And it's like, this is their own reporting. And it's like it never happened. It was just
hi,
totally
Joey. Hi, Pusama.
Totally memory hold. All these things have been totally left out. It's just this context-free, people are free, people are happy, all these different pieces. And I know there's elements to that, but it just feels like historical malpractice that, there's not a deeper, more contextual discussion of how we got to this point. But anyway, that's enough of me going on and on. You're right there in the pressure cooker of the region. So, I mean, obviously, I'm sure you have many thoughts, but anything you want to offer here?
Well, yeah, I'll also preface what I want to say with I really encourage people to go watch the episode I did with Elijah Magnier like 2 days ago. It's, an excellent overview of the parts of the Syrian war that have been largely written out of the present day history that the mainstream media is giving us. And look, it's not a black and white situation when it comes to Syria. This is a country that, like a lot of countries actually across the region, unfortunately, had a very repressive dictatorship. No one ever denied that. my whole life, I've known that. My family's known that. I mean, Syria at one point occupied portions of Lebanon, and that impacted my family pretty dramatically, like it did a lot of people's families in Lebanon, who were on secret police lists. And, lots of people across the region have been in Syrian prisons. And, Baathism has had a very unfortunate way of ruling in the countries where it's taken hold as a one-party, state, whether it's Iraq or Syria. And I don't want to take that away from people, because I do know that in the downfall of this particular government, there are people who were even supportive of this government during the war, for reasons I can explain, who are kind of breathing a sigh of relief. It was a really repressive atmosphere for decades and decades that this government in Syria created. That said, I say that because the people who supported this government during the war after 2011 supported it not because they love Baathism or love Assad. They didn't fight and die against the opposition groups because they love the Syrian regime, as it's called. They did it because this is what's being written out. The US and the Gulf states in the region, and Israel, by the way, launched a proxy war on Syria where they funded a collection of sectarian religious extremist groups that were made up of ISIS, Al-Qaeda, and various different named groups that were all connected to them and had a similar ideology that wreaked havoc across the country and tried to collapse the Syrian state. And lots of people in Syria, secular people, even conservative religious people, and especially minorities, saw the behavior of these groups after the Arab Spring and felt the alternative to the Syrian government that was being presented to them was so disgusting, reprehensible, and violent. They supported and fought for the government side. And it was such a threat to the entire region, not just to Syria. You had ISIS take over huge swaths of Iraq. Parts of Lebanon were invaded. There was car bombs going off in Lebanon that were directed by Mohammed al-Jolani's group, who is now, in charge of Hayat Tahrir al-Sham. It was destabilizing Lebanon, and you had attacks in other parts of the world by this group that was based in Syria. So this was a massive security threat, which is why you had the Iranians, the Iraqis, and the Lebanese, and then eventually the Russians get involved to save the Syrian state from falling into the hands of ISIS and Al-Qaeda. That's what's being written out. And it's really important context, because now it's being described as though, like, the Iranians and Hezbollah and all these evil people just came in to prop up this man called Assad, as opposed to, no, there was like a collaboration that was carried out, a partnership to defeat ISIS. Much like what you saw in World War II, where you saw a lot of different contradictory elements come together to defeat the Nazis, including the US allying with Russia or the Soviet Union, where Stalin was in charge. You know what I mean? So these are not people who typically ally, right? They did to defeat the Nazis. So you had a similar thing take place here. And the reason that context is important is that the group that led the attack on the Syrian government, HTS, Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, is a rebranded version of Mohammed al-Jolani's al-Nusra, which was the Al-Qaeda affiliate in Syria during the Syrian war. And I really recommend going and listening to my conversation with Elijah about that. And look, this group seems to have evolved. It seems to have pragmatically, not ideologically, pragmatically moderated a bit. And they did take over Syria. The government also didn't fight back. Assad screwed over his people. He did. And that's what people here are saying, like in Lebanon. And my friends in Syria as well, they feel abandoned by Assad after fighting and giving their lives to protect the state from collapsing. He left without saying a word, and also while lying to people throughout, saying, oh, no, we're just retreating to regroup to fight from here. So there's a lot of anger, including in the resistance axis. You see a lot of finger pointing. Iran is saying we offered help, they didn't want it. Russia saying we offered help and warned them, they didn't want it. We also told them to negotiate with Turkey. He wouldn't do it. And you also have like sort of leaks coming out of Hezbollah saying, and also the Yemenis, by the way, saying they had basically begged Assad to open the Golan Front during the genocide in Gaza. He refused to. That's a whole other conversation, but there's so many elements to this. And I think it's all important context, but the fact of the matter is that at the same time, it also doesn't really matter anymore because Syria is different. The Assad government, the Assad regime is gone. It doesn't exist anymore. And now you have a situation where people are celebrating, they're happy. The images, of people being freed from prisons are very heartwarming and also like very disturbing because obviously people suffered tremendously in that prison system. I hope it doesn't get replicated. And a lot of people are hoping the same thing. But you also have a situation where you have armed groups of men in a really chaotic environment in the aftermath of basically the collapsing of a state, kind of roaming and patrolling the streets. Many of them are religious extremists. Some of them are foreign fighters. There's been a few incidences here and there of violence, some sectarian violence, some kind of random violence, people kind of taking advantage of a collapse in law and order. And so people are holding their breath, kind of scared and just waiting to see what happens, especially people from minority sects and secular people. And that should not be dismissed, by the way. People are trying to dismiss that. Those fears should not be dismissed because that can turn into a very dangerous, frightening situation. That said, there's also another element of this, which is the Israelis. The Israelis took complete advantage. And right after this happened, they began bombing Syria. They've carried out almost, if not more at this point, 500 airstrikes on Syria since this regime change happened. 500 airstrikes. And what have they been doing with those airstrikes is completely dismantling and destroying Syria's entire military infrastructure. All of its air bases, all of its naval bases, all of its weapons, all of its air defense capabilities are basically gone. So now you have a new Syria, and the media is portraying it as Israel is striking Assad's weapons and Assad's bases. These are military infrastructure that belong to the country of Syria, no matter who's in charge of it, whether it's Bashar al-Assad, whether it's Mohammed al-Jalani, whether it's whatever transitional, government is being put in place right now. That is the Syrian government, and this is their sovereign military infrastructure that is being calculatedly dismantled by the Israelis with a U.S. nod, and the world is saying nothing. And people are disturbed that the new authorities in Syria haven't said anything. Now, do they have the capacity to fight back? Not really. It's just been taken away from them by the Israelis. However, it is disturbing. They have not even addressed it. They've dismissed it. And so people are very concerned about what this means for resistance in the region, because there are fears that whoever takes over in Syria is going to allow Israel to basically do what they're doing right now, which is to expand territory. Israel has basically thrown out the 1974 agreement that had a buffer zone in the Golan Heights between the illegally Israeli occupied side of the Golan Heights and the part that is still held by Syria. And that was in place until now. Now Israel's saying, we don't respect this agreement anymore. And they went over the buffer zone and are claiming to create a new buffer zone. But what they're actually doing is taking Syrian territory, which their settler groups are already planning to settle. Like, this is real. This is like Greater Israel Project happening in front of our faces. There are reports of them forcibly evicting people from their homes in certain areas and they're actually apparently like 20 kilometers away from Damascus. They're claiming they won't go to Damascus, but it's the Israelis, who knows. But also they're surrounding Lebanon from the Syrian side to cut off Lebanon further. I mean, this is an incredibly dangerous situation. They've also still not fully withdrawn from Lebanon. Every single day since the ceasefire in Lebanon a couple weeks ago, the Israelis have bombed and killed people and shot people, and their forces are still in southern Lebanon. They're supposed to withdraw over the 60-day period of this ceasefire, but who knows? It's the Israelis. Maybe they won't withdraw. And also, again, their settlers are talking about settling southern Lebanon. They are planning and deciding which plots of land. There's even been Israeli settlers who have come into Lebanon to assess the territory. with the Israeli army just kind of looking on and doing nothing about it, just like they do in the West Bank. And they've been doing that in Syria as well. This is really, really dangerous. And there doesn't seem to be anybody to stop them anymore. It's Hezbollah sort of on its own in Lebanon. It's much more weakened. It's extremely weakened compared to what it was like 2 months ago because of all the Israeli bombings. And now, I mean, Hezbollah is still able to protect southern Lebanon on the ground, but the deterrence is gone. They don't have Syria anymore because they've been pushed out of Syria by what just transpired over the last 5 days or 2 weeks. And now Syria is basically not a part of the resistance axis anymore. It's believed they probably can't be. They don't even have the capacity to be. Their defenses have been taken out. It's a really horrifying situation. It's great for Israel. It's great for America. It's bad for everybody else in the region because at the end of the day, I want to see freedom and democracy flourish across the entire Middle East, not just Syria. I'd love to see it in Egypt. I'd love to see it in Jordan. Also, incredibly repressive police states that have prisons, not so different, where people are held and tortured, just like in Syria. I want to see all those people freed too. But at the end of the day, we're talking about the Israelis really, really expanding their Greater Israel project like they never have before. The opportunity is ripe. The opportunity is there. They're taking it, and the forces of resistance are extremely weakened at this point. In Syria, it doesn't seem like anybody's going to be able to push back against it, and that's what's incredibly scary. And, before I go back to you here, Eugene, I just want to add to that in this moment, this issue has been so divisive. It's been divisive throughout the Syrian war. It split the Palestine Solidarity Movement back in 2016 and 2017 in a really significant way that it finally started to recover from, especially after the last year of genocide. And now nobody's talking about Gaza. Lebanon has been forgotten despite all the devastation in Lebanon. And we're back where we were, where people are fighting with each other. People are calling each other Assadists, which is a term that's meaningless to begin with, but it's even more meaningless than it was before now because there is no more Assad. There's no reason to run around calling people Assadists anymore. There is no more Assad. This is a moment in time where a genocidal settler state, Israel, is still the biggest existential crisis to everybody in this region. And the facts are the facts. Syria is in the hands of somebody else now. We have to deal with that and hope for the best. I really do hope for the best in that situation. But the majority of people who are watching this are Americans, and they're likely in the US. And so we have to, in this moment, try not to fall for smears, slander, and get into the whole idea of making Syria this divisive issue that tears the Palestine movement apart. Because so much work has been done over the last year to push back against Zionism. And despite the fact that Israel has materially gained a lot in the short term, at least in this region, it is more isolated than ever internationally, and there is a global movement to push back against Zionism, Israeli settler colonialism, U.S. imperialism, and we need to focus on that more than anything else. It's so crucial because what I'm seeing right now with the divisiveness is incredibly disturbing, and there is an attempt to really silence anybody who wants to question the media representation of Syria right now or how things are going to move forward in Syria. And I don't think that's a good atmosphere to have, especially when there is still a genocide ongoing in Gaza.
No, I think that's a great point, and I'll just basically leave it there with agreeing with you. I mean, I think we have to hope for the best. We have to look at this. I'll just say this, there's a lot to be said about human rights in Syria, but I think people should also read what Amnesty International, if you want to quote them on Assad, was saying about HTS in Idlib. And you might be surprised to hear some of that. And I make that point really looking at the impact of sanctions right there on you, Rania. I make that point really, not to be excessively provocative, but I think so many people have said, well, you can't put everybody in the camp of HTS in the opposition. You can't say that just because they had forced disappearances and executions and all that and torture, that everyone is like that. And of course, all the people in the opposition are not like that. But the same is also true on the other side. And I think you made the point very well, Rania, about why some people did side with the Syrian government under Assad against some of these opposition groups. And I think if there's going to be a positive future moving forward, the kind of divisiveness that takes out all the context of why people are acting in certain ways on both sides of the conflict is not going to get us there. And, I want to be as hopeful as we can. Obviously, we've seen some collaboration between, elements of the former Syrian government and the new forces that are there. There's a lot of talk about not having a de-Baathification like Iraq and having things collapse into civil war. You even see Russia and Iran continue to try to be engaged in different ways, along with the Gulf states, along with other entities. So, I think hopefully there is a path forward for national reconciliation in a way that can be really positive for Syria and for the region. But I do think that these nuances that you've introduced here are critically important to understand. And yes, Palestine, we have to keep our eyes on Gaza. And I'll just say one more time, I hope folks have an opportunity to check out what you did with Elijah Magnier. I guess that was Monday. God, this week is going so fast. But you can find it in the live tab of our YouTube page if you are going to Breakthrough News /YouTube, youtube.com/Breakthrough News. I wish it was breakthroughnews.com/YouTube. But that being said, let's just leave it there for now. This is obviously an ongoing conversation and a lot to be said and to be had here. So
do you want me to start with what they did in what Israel has done in Syria over the last 48 hours? 350 fighter jets, which is basically their full stock of planes, of fighter jets that were previously split between Lebanon and Gaza. They carried out more than 320 strikes throughout Syria. All over Syria, but focusing, and Army Radio called it the largest attack in the history of the Israeli Air Force. They went at the Air Force, all of the bases, all of the Syrian army bases, any materiel. They went after the naval platforms. They sunk their naval ships. They basically just spent 48 hours doing whatever they wanted throughout Syria immediately. And not to be outdone, the Americans did the same thing. They carried out 75 strikes on Sunday within hours of the Southern Operations Room Free Syrian Army getting into Damascus. The Americans immediately set out with B-52 bombers, which are not used very often, to carry out 75 strikes that they say were on ISIS operational capabilities. Difficult to know. They just give you the numbers. But Syria turned into a place that had been bombed at a historic level over the last 48 hours. And of course, I think we're going to get more into it. There's also a significant land grab, but the Israeli military said that most of the strategic weapons stockpiles in Syria, estimated between 70 and 80% of the Assad regimes, which it's not the Assad regimes, it's the Syrians. The Syrians' strategic weapon supply was wiped out in less than 48 hours and destroyed 15 naval vessels during that time as well. They destroyed cruise missiles, sea-to-air missiles, air defense missiles, Scud missiles, all of the missile capabilities, fighter jets, attack helicopters, radars, tanks, hangars. We saw them bomb ministries. So it was just basically a free-for-all for the Israelis. They came across the border significantly with a massive land grab, a strategic land grab that took Mount Hermon, which was the largest natural border. Now Israel controls that. So it's been a really, this last 10 days was lightning fast events that sometimes take 10 years happening in 10 days, and culminating in Israel land grabbing, bombing, and destroying what would be used for a new Syrian state to carry out the most elementary defense of its populations have been destroyed. And the amount of time it would take to rebuild that, it's a devastating hit.
Well, that's what we're going to be talking about. Ali and Asa, why don't you situate us with more of the latest kind of regional political developments. And Helena Cobbin, we're so honored to have you back to help us make sense of what's been happening in Syria over the last 10 days. It's unimaginable.
Well, one update is that what are we calling him now? Abu Muhammad al-Jolani, Ahmed al-Shara, who is the leader of Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, the Al-Qaeda offshoot backed by the United States and Turkey, who is now the de facto ruler of Syria, made his first comments to the foreign media today, and there's also video of him speaking, in which he makes no mention of the Israeli attack on the country whatsoever, which is astonishing, really. And the only enemies he names of Syria are Iran and Hezbollah. So there doesn't seem to be any indication that the new de facto authority is planning to respond to this in any way.
No, I mean, it really seems like they're letting Israel enact whatever Israel has been planning for taking more of Syrian land. It's astonishing, but not surprising.
Yeah, so I've got a few items to take us through to kind of guide the discussion. Just to list the items and then we can go through them from the beginning. So the first one is the article that myself and Ali wrote on Monday explaining a lot of this, and then I think we could probably skip the second one now. John's covered that for the most part, and then we've got an update on some of the stuff that's been happening in Syria, just quickly, because we're not going to get into that in too much detail, and then a couple of analyses by Ali Hashem and Alistair Crook, and then the Iranian leader's most recent update about all this. So first of all, Tamara, the article, just if you could put that back up on the screen again. It's so we wrote this as a response to what happened in Syria, giving a kind of summary of as John said, the really fast moving events that have happened, the lightning fast moving events. And I'm not going to get into the whole thing, but just a couple of bullet points from it. So Israeli tanks were reportedly on the outskirts of Damascus early on Tuesday as Israel launched airstrikes across the country, being called the heaviest in the history of Syria. Netanyahu immediately claimed credit for the downfall of Syrian President Bashar al-Assad, saying it was a historic day and a direct result of the blows we've inflicted on Iran and Hezbollah. We really explain in the article how what has been happening is, of course, viewed positively by some Syrians and, many people as, the overthrow of a dictator, but many other Syrians are, fearful of what could happen. And many people in the region are fearful of what could happen next. There's a lot of uncertainty. And of course, Syria was for decades the backbone of the axis of resistance to US hegemony. It was a vital land bridge for the supply of rockets to the resistance, advanced weaponry from Iran to the resistance in South Lebanon. And many people in the region view Assad's downfall as a strategic win for Israel and the US. And there's a lot more detail in the article. And, we get into, for example, some of the rebel commanders anonymous rebel commanders have been speaking positively in the Israeli media about how they want to normalize ties with Israel and so forth.
Hey, so let's before you go on to the next ones, I think what we'll do is maybe we'll get Helena's reaction.
Yeah, I mean, Helena, like you've been following events in Syria not just recently, but for decades. And I know you have a lot of thoughts on this. So, I mean, I don't know if you had a chance to read our article, but I know you've got a lot of thoughts on it also. What's your take?
Yeah, I have so many thoughts. I've been following events in Syria since I was a working journalist in Beirut in the 1970s, which kind of dates me, I guess. But I'm still a young writer.
You're a youth, right?
Yeah.
Rifat says so.
That's right.
But yeah, so I think going back to what John said, it's important to understand that these air attacks that the Israeli army organized across nearly all of Syria, taking out everything that is a military capability. And I think John described it as the most, or maybe the Israelis themselves are describing it as the largest single air attack in history. I mean, it's actually larger than what they were doing in 1967 when they wiped out the air forces of Syria and Jordan and Syria and Egypt on the tarmac before they went any further. So the situation is now that they have established clear air dominance over the whole of Syria. Or rather, no, they've established clear air dominance over the whole of Syria up to where the Turkish army is, and the Turkish, like around Idlib, and then over on the east where the Americans have their position from which they've been bombing as well. But there is zero capability now, either in terms of arrangements on the ground or in terms of being able to mount an air defense for a Syrian national army to defend the country whatsoever, even if there were a Syrian national army at this point, which is actually not true.
Doubtful.
And so, you have to look at the way that the Syrian army command collapsed and the role. I have no idea exactly how it was done, but clearly Bashar al-Assad, who was not a military person, he had not been trained to be the leader. His father, of course, had been the commander of the Syrian Arab Air Force before he took over the presidency in September of 1970. Also worth noting that when Hafez al-Assad did that in 1970, it was as part of a move to prevent the Syrian National Air Force and National Army from helping the Palestinians in North Jordan during Black September of 1970. So there are a lot of things to unpack here, but I think the central thing is to note that the Syrian army, there is no Syrian unified army command at all, or at any level, apart from I've heard some reports that maybe in some of the mountains around Lazaiyeh, there are some Syrian National Army units. But
and
so
there's also reports that around 2,000 Syrian soldiers have been evacuated with their heavy equipment to Iraq.
Some of the reports I've been seeing and reading, and of course it's difficult to know exactly what's true and what isn't, but you can sort of sense what is plausible. And some of the reports are that over the last few years, both Iran and Russia, which were the main powers behind the Syrian government in recent years, and they make clear, the way they put it is, we weren't there to support Bashar al-Assad, we were there to fight these Al-Qaeda linked groups that threatened the region. That's how they put it. You can agree with that or disagree with that. But in recent years, they had pressed Assad to use the period of the truce since, 2016 or 2017 or around then, to rebuild the Syrian army, and that had by and large failed to happen. And of course, Syria is under such intense sanctions, and the central bank is cut off from the international financial system, that soldiers were being paid something like $10, $15 a month when these HTS and the other groups are being paid hundreds or even thousands of dollars a month, of course, by the foreign sponsors. And so you just couldn't really motivate them to fight. And at a certain point, the fear was that the army would break down. So it just had been hollowed out by the sounds of it, and then the assessment in the end is that it would be a bloodbath that wouldn't be redeemable anyway. I don't know if that's true, but it sounds plausible.
I think that's a really good description from what I know about it. And Imam Khamenei's address today also noted some of these things, and people can maybe access that via Twitter or
we have
other ways.
that clip, actually. Maybe
Yeah,
we
let's
could
play
play
it.
that. Do we have the sound?
Why don't we start it again? I can read the subtitles, which are the translation. Obviously, this is Ali Khamenei, the guide of the Islamic Revolution in Iran, and he spoke today. He says there should be no doubt about what happened. In Syria was plotted collectively by the United States and Israel. Yes, the government of a neighboring country,
That's Turkey, but he doesn't
of
mention
Syria, yeah, also played an obvious role in this regard. It is still playing an obvious role. Everyone is seeing this. But the primary planners are the US and the Zionist regime. The primary operators, the primary conspirators, the primary planners, the primary command room is in America and Israel. We have evidence for it. These instances of evidence leave no room for doubt. So that's Ali Khamenei, the supreme leader or the leader of the Islamic Revolution in Iran. And of course,
there's two other points that he made later in the speech that were sort of notable. He gave a optimistic prognosis for the future of the resistance axis, saying it will spread further than before. And he also seemed to confirm the analysis that perhaps we'll get onto in a little bit, saying, quote, "Our intelligence services warned Syrian officials several months before of the enemy's plots, but this information was neglected."
And what's in it? You know, a lot of people, a lot of the fear about the fall of the Syrian government, you know, aside from central to this is what Syrian people want, and it is a divided society. Some people are very ecstatic about this, and others are very fearful and mortal fear of what the new rulers might do, just as many before were in mortal fear of the government that existed up to that point. But in terms of the regional dynamics, a lot of people felt, well, they looked at the map and they said Syria is the land bridge between Iran and the resistance in the south of Lebanon, Hezbollah. That's how the weapons come in. Syria is the strategic depth of the resistance. That's how people describe it. And so one conclusion some people come to, or one fear they have, is, well, now Hezbollah is isolated in southern Lebanon, and therefore Hezbollah will be fatally weakened. The question I have, both for Helena and perhaps for John too, is that the case, given that Gaza is even more isolated than southern Lebanon, and is, as we've just seen from John's report, is still fighting? What can we say about that?
John first, if you want.
Do you want me to go first? Sure. I think it's overstated. The war, at least at this point, the transfers over the last 14 months, Israel has had carte blanche in Syrian airspace since October 7th. And as we know, for the decade preceding that, virtually, they had coordination with the Russians at most, and carried out strikes deep inside Syria, constantly trying to intercept, interrupt the development of strategic weapons shipments. It's an important part, there's no doubt. I mean, just even the fighters traveling overland for training is very important, but there are other ways to get weapons in. It's not advantageous to have Syria be cut off, but it's not. There's a lot of talk about that, like Syria is the backbone of the resistance, and I think we need to be very careful about those kind of statements. The Assad government was deeply unpopular. Its soldiers did not want to fight for it, so we can't be saying that that is the backbone of the resistance, because it's just demonstrably untrue. There will be differences in the way that weapons can be transferred. There's different ways that fighters can move from place to place to train. It's a devastating loss of the sovereignty of an important country in the region, and the toll that the country has paid in the first 48 hours alone is testament to that. But writing off the capabilities of the resistance, particularly Hezbollah and especially Qassam, is not that's not a position that I agree with. I think that Hezbollah showed themselves to be uninvadable. That is the demonstration of their war with Israel, is that Israel cannot ground invade, cannot carry out mechanized maneuvers, cannot put concentrated infantry forces on the ground in South Lebanon. They were repelled from doing that. And the sovereignty of Lebanon is intact. If this 60-day ceasefire goes as it is, the sovereignty of Lebanon will be intact. There's certainly going to be a disruptive period in weapons trade, but those weapons didn't come on a convoy of trucks all the way through Iraq and Syria. That's what was bombed. So that has been a problem that goes back multiple years before this weekend, when the world got flipped on its head in the Middle East. And as far as the Palestinian resistance they get manuals and training guides and tactical briefings, but the resistance in Gaza is built in Gaza. It's not dependent on arms shipments from Syria. It's dependent, insofar as it is dependent, it's on rhetorical support. And over the last 14 months, the Assad regime's rhetorical support for Gaza was virtually absent. And we maybe get into more about that when we talk about the political machinations, because Assad has been playing a game for this whole year to keep himself out of the October 7th, keep himself out of the axis of resistance. And so I think that there's a lot of discussion on social media about the backbone of the resistance being taken out. And I would urge caution on those kind of statements. First of all, it's not our place to make those statements. The resistance factions themselves are not making those statements. So I would just urge caution on that. It's definitely a major disruption. There's no doubt.
And I want to, sorry, Helena, just allow me for a second. I think this is important. The resistance didn't depend, nothing depends on the presence of any particular leader like Bashar al-Assad or anything else. But what is important is a sovereign Syria. And nobody who supports Palestinian liberation, Asa and I say this in our article, should have anything to fear from a sovereign Syria, a Syria that is independent and sovereign and in control of itself, because we have no doubt in where the compass of the Syrian people lies. But what is being created here is a non-sovereign Syria, a Syria that has been completely robbed of its sovereignty, territorial integrity, and political independence. Syria is being carved up. Israel has grabbed land.
Like this, as it stands, the state is gone.
The state has been failed. It has been failed and collapsed, not just by what happened in the last days, but by decades of sanctions aimed at hollowing the state out and forcing a collapse and really making any type of reform impossible, because then, when it's sort of in this survival mode. So no one has anything to fear from a sovereign Syria. The question is, will Syria be sovereign? Anyway, Helena, I'm sorry.
No, that was a really important point to make, Ali. Just coming back to some of the things that John was talking about, and in particular this question of the effects on Hezbollah, I think it's really important what Asa was talking about earlier, from this statement that Ahmed Shara, the man formerly known as al-Julani, the statement that he gave this morning, in which he said, we don't have any enemies except for Iran and Hezbollah. So he is like just blatantly saying that Hezbollah is his enemy. Now, I don't know how many people in Syria, Lebanon, or Palestine think that that is a position they want to align with at this point, when Hezbollah continues to be under terrible, terrible assault from the Zionist forces. So that's one thing. And I think it's worth contrasting that with the statements that both Hezbollah and Hamas put out, I think on Sunday or Monday, in which they sent their best wishes to the Syrian people and, said, we wish the Syrian people nothing but good. And then this Ahmed Shara comes back with this, statement of hate toward Iran and Hezbollah. So that's one thing to note. So Ali has previously said that people in Syria have a range of opinions. We know that, but in our country, here in the United States, there has been this determined campaign for, let me say, honestly, the 50 years that I've been following this thing, to say that, the Assad regime, whether it's the father or the son, is completely illegal and is hated by the Syrian people, and to manufacture consent for regime change. And that obviously, it's come and gone. At some points, the US government and the corporate media were kind of in a semi-alliance with the Assad government of the day. But definitely since 2011, this campaign for regime change in Syria, and that started with calling it a regime rather than a government, has gone into overdrive, both from the US government and, just referring back to Hillary Clinton and like the way that she facilitated and organized, and the CIA implemented the sending of all those heavy weapons from Libya to the opposition in northwest Syria in 2012 or thereabouts, in coordination with Turkey, in very concrete support for the regime change project. So, in our country, there is huge amount of propaganda from the government and the corporate media saying that, Assad is universally despised and hated inside Syria. He's viewed as so corrupt, and all the people there hate him, and the views of the people that working with the regime change project, get amplified, and we have, all kinds of things happening, like Hollywood and novels and novelists and people, all of them kind of Syrian opposition figures whose voices are lauded. And in the present instance, in these past few days, we've seen the corporate media trying to tell us, these Syrians are all overjoyed with the overthrow of Assad. I just note that Craig Murray went to the Masna border crossing, where the corporate media had been reporting that, thousands, tens of thousands of Syrians from Lebanon were flocking back to Syria. And he said, well, there's maybe a dozen cars in line. So he was kind of underlining the degree to which the corporate media are manufacturing consent for the overthrow of the Syrian government.
And
part of that is also the rebranding of al-Julani and literal, like people are calling it the DEI-ification of ISIS and Al-Qaeda. Saying that
Zelenskyfication.
Right.
DEI is diversity, equity, inclusion. It's sort of a buzzword, meaning that there was actually that headline in the British Daily Telegraph where they say they call Jolani diversity friendly.
Yes,
beyond parody,
inclusive, right?
Well,
that he wants to include all the different Syrians.
Oh,
right?
and they give him a kind of Zelensky type uniform.
Yeah, exactly. They gave him a nice shirt, and he trimmed his beard a little bit, I mean, really trying. I mean, this is like the rebranding efforts of all friendly. Dictators that have been propped up by the CIA.
Ahmed Shaer, who is the head of this HTS movement.
Ahmed Shara. But of course, it's undoubtedly the case that many Syrians are overjoyed, and we saw Syrians coming out into the streets. Some of them were overjoyed. We saw prisoners being released and being reunited with their families. But what we're not seeing is the Syrians who aren't overjoyed, because they're not going to come out into the streets and say we're not overjoyed. Those are people who are going to be staying at home, living in fear, as many are in many parts of Syria, and they're Syrian too. And they have good reason to be afraid, given the record of these groups, Hayat Tahrir al-Sham and the various alphabet soup of ISIS-related and Al-Qaeda-related groups that have now taken over. And Asa and I pointed this out in our article, which you don't really have to look very far back to see what's going on, because remember that this group was running Idlib, this enclave on the border with Syria, for the last couple of years. And Human Rights Watch, which, is not always a group I put stock in, but I think we can take Human Rights Watch seriously here, because Human Rights Watch has always been sympathetic to Western government policy, and its longtime director, Kenneth Roth, ex-director now, but he was director during much of the Syria war, is a strong proponent of regime change. And so the Human Rights Watch documented many of the abuses in Idlib under the rule of Jolani and HTS, including arbitrary imprisonment, torture, horrifying abuses, and we haven't seen those prisons being opened up. And in March of this year, there were widespread protests across Idlib. This was reported by Voice of America, by Deutsche Welle, by all Western media across Idlib governorate against HTS and its abuses. And those protests broke out again in May against people, against HTS in Idlib, by people complaining that HTS was very abusive, including torturing people to death in its prisons. And the reason I say that is because we're being told all the time, well, aren't you happy to see people being released from prisons? Of course I'm happy to see political prisoners being released, no matter who is holding them. It's absolutely horrifying that anyone should have been held, and nobody is pretending or should pretend that the government of Bashar al-Assad or his father was, the government of Finland or any other sort of supposedly ideal liberal state. But the whitewashing the people who have been backed by the United States and Turkey and tacitly by Israel over the 13 years of the civil war That's propaganda. That's not analysis. And what we aim to do here is analysis to understand the reality so that we're not taken by surprise by events. You've got to understand who these people are.
Yeah.
That's who they are. And to date, you can go to the FBI website and the bounty of $10 million for al-Julani is still there for anyone who can help the United States government to locate him. Well, apparently they know where he is now. Maybe they'll collect the $10 million themselves.
Yeah, viewers and listeners, if you want to learn a lot more about all that, you can go to our article. We get into the details that Ali was talking about there with the history of Jolani and his record and the record of his associated groups of abuses and atrocities in Syria. But since we published that article, there's been, an update on that in the sense that there's been a lot of horrific videos coming out of Syria, and we're not going to show them because they're graphic. But despite Jolani's rhetoric, he'd been making these public statements about calling for his men not to indulge in sectarian killings and so forth. There's a lot of reports actually coming out of just that happening, of sectarian killings across Syria. There was one video which was obtained by Al Mayadeen, which again we're not going to show it, but it was just one example of the kinds of things that are coming out. And in the video, we can see several men in civilian clothing, some of whose hands are bound up, and they were executed by a gang of armed men in military fatigues. And the video is shown from their point of view, right? So they're actually filming themselves carrying out these atrocities. And at least one of them was wearing an ISIS patch. And the armed men scream abuse and sectarian epithets at the victims, calling them pigs and Nusayris, which is an abusive term for Syrians from the Alawi community, the Alawi religious sect. 2 to 3 million approximately Syrians are from that religious community. And so there's a lot of fear that is going around from people in the region and that we're not really hearing about in the mainstream media.
And even supposing that HTS, run by Jolani, who was the former emissary of al-Baghdadi, the head of ISIS. So remember, Jolani was a member of ISIS, and then he founded the Al-Qaeda branch in Syria. And now he's had this Western media makeover where he's now called the diversity-friendly jihadi, literally by the Telegraph. I don't know, maybe Asa, you can even pull that headline up and we can look at it in a minute. Suppose that HTS has been completely reformed, as people say, and it's now, being run along diversity, equity, and inclusion lines. The problem is that in the chaos of Syria, the collapse of the state, all these other groups, and I've seen these videos too, we're not going to show any, of the people in ISIS patches, with ISIS patches and this sort of thing, going around murdering people and harassing them. They're not under anyone's control. That's what, when you have a failed state, nobody is in control. And that's why so many people are utterly terrified, and that has to be acknowledged too. I would be, you can think of all sorts of governments that are less than ideal, and yet there's still an element where a lot of people are going to feel unsafe when the state as itself collapses.
Yeah, I think this has been a huge story, actually, since the US invasion of Afghanistan, and then the invasion of Iraq, and then the so-called humanitarian mission in Libya. I mean, this is what happens when they deliberately destroy the structure of a state, the defensive structure of a state. So, the Israelis and the Americans between them over the last 13 years have been working on doing this to Syria. And in the past 48 hours, their militaries have been, just systematically demolishing all the defensive capabilities of the Syrian state. So yes, we have a failed state with massive Turkish incursion in the north, massive Israeli incursion in the south, and the American presence over there in the east. So people have a mix of emotions, and we don't need to get too bound up with the emotionalism. But obviously, when prisoners get released from a jail, when people who have been deported get to go back to their homes, that is wonderful. That is wonderful for Syria's people. Let's think about the many Lebanese and Palestinians who would love to see those things happen for themselves. to
and
have.
this. What about this? And the Syrians in the
Yeah,
jets in Idlib.
in Idlib. Yeah, thank you.
And the millions of Syrians displaced by this 13-year war that was funded to the tune of billions of dollars by the United States, by Turkey, by Qatar, by Saudi Arabia. The sanctions that immiserated people, millions of refugees left Syria, many went to Europe. And now you have these European countries that also funded the proxy war and the dirty war in Syria, immediately saying, oh, we're sending you all back. And where are they? Austria announced that it's going to begin deportations of Syrians. Germany announced that it's going to stop processing asylum applications from Syrians, and other of these human rights loving EU states are announcing the same. To send them back to where? To send them back to a country that is in total collapse, that is being bombed, whose economy has been totally destroyed by sanctions, where there are uncontrolled sectarian gangs running around murdering people already, even within days of the state's collapse, and you're going to send all these people back there. There was Libya. Still nobody talks about Libya now in the Western media. All the people who are championing the regime change war in Libya, the NATO bombing and the murder of Libya's leader, which Hillary Clinton applauded and laughed about and cackled about and thought was just a wonderful thing. There's a UN report published in August. We linked to it in the article that Ace and I wrote about the utter chaos, the disaster in Libya today. It's on the edge of civil war. No one cares about it. No one talks about it. And all those people who are talking about, oh, we're going to bomb Libya into a democracy, all those people have moved on. They don't talk about Libya now.
I think it's also important to focus the effects of all these events on the Palestinian rights movement globally, because the re-emergence of intense sectarianism within Syria and those kind of sectarian comments that Ahmed Sha'ir, Jolani, whatever his name is, his very sectarian comments, and the fact that we have this kind of re-emergence of sectarianism in the global discussion, not just about Syria, but potentially this could harm again the Palestinian rights movement. I mean, we know that the discussions, the divisions over Syria were very harmful within the Palestinian rights movement here in the United States right until October 7th of 2023. And then on October the 7th, 2023, we had the big Hamas-led breakout from Gaza, which sparked a huge amount of support all around the world, including in this country, but it also sparked very, very solid solidarity actions of a military nature from Hezbollah and from Ansar Allah in Yemen, the Houthis, which are overwhelmingly Shiite movements. Hamas and most Palestinian Muslims being Sunnis. So suddenly that whole narrative of, a sectarian divide throughout the region and that Sunnis and Shiites are fundamentally at odds with each other, and we Westerners need to just stand aside and let them kill each other, while actually fomenting the sectarianism as much as we can, as white people do through colonies, empires throughout history. That whole narrative of sectarian divide collapsed on October 7th and October 8th of 2023. Yeah. And people stopped talking about it.
One of the things we always heard from Iraqis when the civil war started in Iraq after the, soon after the American and British invasion of Iraq in 2003, that horrible sectarian war that took place, time and time again you would hear from Iraqis, we never knew who was Sunni and who was Shia until they came and fomented this, essentially. And that, to me, that was one of the reasons that these fanatical groups were deliberately encouraged.
And we've said it before,
intelligence agencies.
And we've said it before here, that the United States has weaponized sectarianism. They did it in Iraq. They did it after Israel's 2006 defeat in Lebanon, when Hezbollah's stock across the region was very high and support for the resistance was very high. So you had this massive propaganda campaign after 2006 in Saudi-funded media across the region to try to rebrand Hezbollah as a sectarian Shia extension of Iran instead of an Arab Muslim Arab
Deeply
nationalist resistance
indigenously
movement.
Lebanese. I mean,
Indigenously Lebanese. And that has penetrated so many people's minds. And it was, I thought that one of the good things of the, there's nothing, very little that can be said that's good about the last 14 months. But I thought one of the silver linings was that sectarianism had been put to bed, and people had started to understand that the fate of the region is one, and that if people are disunited and allow themselves to be divided and ruled, then the United States and Israel, the road is open to them to do what they want. And it's just tragic to me how quickly that sectarianism was reawakened in so many people and weaponized in the most disgusting and revolting ways. And but one question I want to put to Helena to begin with, but of course to anyone, is, of course, Joe Biden also claimed credit. He said that this was because of what Israel had done to Hezbollah and what Ukraine had done to Russia over the last 14 months, with the unflagging support of the United States. Those are Joe Biden's words. And so there's a lot of triumphalism in Washington and in Tel Aviv over the collapse of the Syrian government, Helena. And so do you think that has whetted their appetites to turn their regime change efforts to other countries, or whether it be Iraq, whether it be Yemen, where they have a US Saudi-backed government in waiting, living in some hotel somewhere in Saudi Arabia, and of course what they see as the big target or prize, Iran. What do you think?
Yeah, well, certainly that triumphalism is very evident, including, Netanyahu going and standing on the slopes of Mount Hermon and saying, we have destroyed this evil regime. And actually, what he didn't say is we've destroyed the entire capabilities of the state of Syria. But, his Air Force was doing exactly that while he was speaking. And this just shows, the wisdom and dedication of my government. Because, of course, remember that he's under huge threat back at home from the court system. So he desperately needed a big win, and this gives him a big win. And Joe Biden, you can also say, has political reasons to want to go out on what he considers to be a high note after just a devastating year for him politically. So there's a lot of triumphalism, and I'm sure they are hoping that this can lead to a kind of a region-wide movement in support of confronting Iran, because Iran has always been their big prize. And there's that great little quote from General Wesley Clark way back when, who said that on September the 20th, 2001, within 9 days of September 11th, that he heard people in the Pentagon, and that's probably Wolfowitz and Donald Rumsfeld, saying that, they want to overthrow 7 countries within 5 years, starting with Iraq and ending with Iran. Well, they didn't get their 7 countries in 5 years, but here we are, what are we, 23 years after 9/11? And, they've wrecked the countries of Afghanistan, Iraq, Libya, and now finally, fatally, Syria. So maybe they want to go on and confront Iran. I don't think they're going to be able to, actually. I think both at the regional level and at the global level, the United States and its close cohort, ally, puppet, Israel, however you describe that relationship, are much more isolated than they were back in 2001. So that's a bigger story. I can't go into it right now. I think, obviously, the resistance in Gaza, in Lebanon, in the West Bank, the resistance activities of the Houthis, and the kind of the quiet, let's call it the support, the strong political support for that anti-Zionist resistance will continue and grow throughout the whole of West Asia, including, honestly, inside Syria itself. There was a pretty interesting quote I saw recently from this British Syrian author, Robin Yassin Kassab, who was always a strong opponent of Assad. And he said, well, we got what we wanted. It was wonderful. But why did the Israelis then come in and bomb everything in Syria. Well, like, you know, how naive can the guy be? Of course, that's what the Israelis are going to do, with full support from the United States government. But I think the world balance is different now than it was in 2001. The tragic thing to me is that the global majority has been so slow in coming to the defense of the Palestinians in Gaza and the West Bank, the Lebanese in Lebanon. But I hope finally we can see something like that happen. Of course, you can see the weakness of the global majority, honestly, in international institutions. Where is the United Nations coming out to condemn Israel's assaults against Lebanon and Syria? You know, there's supposed to be a ceasefire. Ceasefire? You know, which part of those two words does Israel not understand in Lebanon? And in Syria, we have this UN decreed demilitarized zone on Golan, which is policed by a UN force, the United Nations Disengagement and Observer Force, UNDOF, just as in South Lebanon, there's a UN force, UNIFIL, supposedly monitoring the longer-term ceasefire, the 2006 ceasefire in Lebanon. And Israel just punches right through as if that's fine. You know, United Nations doesn't mean anything to us at all.
One of the interesting things that we cover in our article is it seems they may have been planning to do that quite specifically for some weeks in advance, because they've been building in that so-called buffer zone before the offensive in Idlib started.
Yeah,
so it seems they had prior knowledge.
Demilitarized zone, Asa. It's not. I mean, a buffer zone makes it seem like it's okay, but demilitarized zone is something that has been negotiated and decreed by the United Nations.
Yeah. And there's no United Nations now. I mean, at the time, the 1974 disengagement agreement, as it was called, between Syria and Israel was negotiated. This is a very solemn, serious thing, and it's enacted by the Security Council. And when Netanyahu just announces unilaterally, it's done, it's over, and sends his troops and his tanks into it, you know, if things function the way they were supposed to, the UN Security Council should meet immediately to discuss this gross violation and act to remedy this gross violation of a disengagement and a demilitarized zone, which is enforced by a UN Security Council. And yet there's nothing. There's barely condemnation. In fact, the United States, the statement I saw, basically said that Israel's bombardment of Syria, that's a matter for Israel. So there is no United Nations anymore. Antonio Guterres, the head of the Secretary General, speaks as if he's a State Department spokesperson, basically. There is no independent United Nations authority anymore, if there ever was. There is no Arab League. It's nothing. It exists on paper. No one is waiting for what it has to say. No one cares if it meets or not. So it's not just that the states have collapsed, but any sort of international system, for better or worse, has collapsed. And we live in a very dangerous time, because it's not just, we focus, of course, on what's happening in Palestine and in Syria and Lebanon, but the risk of nuclear war with Russia is increasing because of reckless policies that are aimed at maintaining the hegemony and power of the United States empire. And these things are linked. This, you know, it's not, Russia and Ukraine is not a main topic of our program ever. There are very good programs out there where you can watch those, and we're never going to be as expert as them. But there are also people in Washington who see what's happening in Syria as part of their war on Russia, because of Russia's bases in Syria, because of Russia's presence in Syria. And so what implications does that have? That certainly intensifies Russia's incentives to win the war in Ukraine. So contrary to what some people think, this won't be good for Ukraine from their perspective, because Russia now absolutely cannot afford to fail in Ukraine. Other Arab regimes are going to look at this and not say, oh, we need to, and not just Arab regimes and others, and not say, oh, we need to become wonderful democracies. They're going to say we need to crack down more, because otherwise we might be regime changed. So there are going to be repercussions of this that we're going to see for years to come, all sorts of different types of blowback that we can't even contemplate yet.
Yeah.
Helena, any final thoughts?
Well, I think Ali just encapsulated it really well there. But I think it's really important also for all those of us who care about ending this genocide and this occupation of Gaza to keep our eyes very firmly on the need to avoid sectarianism and to call it out and counter it whenever we can, and to just redouble our efforts to ensure that we have a real global majority capability that will go all around the world, forcing our governments to confront US-Israeli power in West Asia, because, you know, it's going to take a massive operation for that to happen right now, but it will happen because US-Israeli power is hopelessly overextended in West Asia. They're no longer able to manufacture the consent.
Thank you so much, Helena. We will have
How you doing, chat? I'm EP. Sunday, in it. Have I been outdoors much? No, I don't get out much. It is like 50 outside today. I could go outside. Are you saying I should go touch grass? Sleepy, but I said EP. Hi, Schmegley. Thanks, Tails and Wings. Did we make it to 300? Yes. Yes, we hit 301 YouTube subs. Yay! Bah, 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 bah. I'm dressed provocatively today. All right. Hi, Lainey. Sorry for the short stream, you guys. Mm, 3 hours. Yeah. Yeah, I'm really appreciate you all being here today. Hope you have a great one. Peace, love, blessings.